What's going on, Steelers Nation? Welcome back to Steelers Almighty. This is your man, Big B, Brian Hanley. Remember to find us on youtube.com/Steelers Almighty and everywhere that you find your podcast. You know, the draft is coming. The Steelers roster is starting to get filled out, and there's a lot of things that, that are being thrown out there as far as what the Steelers need to do. Do they need to draft a number one receiver or a top flight receiver? What are they going to do, with Cam Heyward and Najee Harris? What are they going to do with their contract? More importantly, what does the depth chart of the offensive side look like? We're going to cover all of that today, from top to bottom, find out exactly what the Steelers need to do, where they're going, all that good stuff. Let's put this together and dig in here, Steeler fans. Let's dive in. So the first thing, there's been a ton of rumors out there with Brandon Aiyuk. And Brandon Aiyuk being a top flight receiver, depending on where you have him, I think Brandon Aiyuk is definitely a top 10 receiver in this league. Do the Steelers need to go after that guy? Well, the answer is yes and no. I don't want to sound wishy-washy or anything like that, because clearly we could use a guy like Brandon Aiyuk on the roster, but let's take a deep dive as far as why we would need him. Look, he's a great route runner, extremely great hands. He would be an upgrade, and he would immediately, and I do mean immediately, be the number one receiver on the Steelers roster. I love George Pickens. I love what he brings to the table, but he is not Brandon Aiyuk. It's kind of like Deontay Johnson last year. If he'd have had his head on his shoulders, he was the number one receivers that the Steelers had, excellent route runner, all that good stuff. Aiyuk is that and more, and he's got a good attitude. There's been a ton of rumors, but I think the rumors are just that. I don't think the Steelers are going to do that. I don't even know that it would make a ton of sense for the Steelers to want to do that. That's just not what we do. Go out and pay big money for an a free agent wide receiver. Now, that doesn't mean that the Steelers can't change their way. Don't get me wrong. Look, Omar Khan has shown over the time that he's been the general manager that he's going to mix things up a little bit and kind of change the way that they do things. And I think that's a good thing. But having said that, Brandon Aiyuk, I just think that the cost and what he's going to cost is just going to be too much. Look, I would love to have him, but I think the rumors are just that. They're just rumors. Now, the one thing that would be against, or it's actually in Brandon Aiyuk's favor, that the Steelers or anybody that's willing to sign him, you're going to have to look at DaVonte Smith, what he just signed. I mean, that has to have every wide receiver out there that's up for a deal. It has to have them drooling. He got $75 million added to his contract of over 3 years, $25 million a year. I mean, yeah, it makes a lot of sense for the Eagles to do that, but it doesn't make a lot of sense for other teams to necessarily do that. I don't think it does, and especially the Pittsburgh Steelers. Look, the draft is full of wide receivers out there. Are there going to be anybody out there that's as good as Brandon Aiyuk? Maybe not, but we don't know. But the one thing that I do know is that money can be allocated to other places. Look, there's things that the Steelers can do to be better. I'm not sure spending all those resources on one wide receiver is the way to go. Matter of fact, I'm positive it's not the way to go. I don't think the Steelers need to do that. I would love to have them. Does it make sense? Sure, it makes sense. But I think there's other guys out there that make even more sense for what the Steelers should do. Let's take a look in and see exactly who some of those guys are. Now, the first thing that comes to mind when we talk about other receivers, and again, this guy has been rumored to be out there for weeks now, is Tyler Boyd. Tyler Boyd is from Pittsburgh, went to Pitt. I mean, he would be an ideal person to be at the wide receiver position for the Steelers. First of all, he's pretty good. That's number one. Second of all, he has been a number 2 or a number 3 receiver since he's been in the league. So he is fit to be a number 2. Look, if the Steelers offense is going to go where it wants to go, George Pickens has to take that next step to be the number 1 receiver. He's got the talent. He's just got to mature. He's got to get a little bit better at the route tree. If we're being honest, I think we all know that as Steeler fans. But if he does that and he takes that next step, Tyler Boyd fits in as a number 2. It's perfect for what the Steelers are trying to do. He's not afraid to go over the middle, not afraid to make the tough catches. He makes a lot of contested catches, and the price is right. Now, the difference comes in is that it seems like Tyler Boyd is wanting a certain number out there that the Steelers aren't willing to pay. I applaud the Steelers for that. We want you, but we want you at our price. We're not going to overpay for a second receiver with all these other receivers that are in the draft. Can we use Tyler Boyd? Yes. Is it the only option? No. Here's a couple of other names out there that maybe people aren't thinking about. I mean, you might say, Big B, you're crazy, but they could fit in and work well with what the Steelers are doing. The first name that comes to mind is Michael Gallup. Look, Michael Gallup is now he's 100%, coming off that ACL injury he had at the end of 2021. So he's back to 100%. His first year, he was dragging his leg around. Last year, I think the Cowboys could have used him more than what they actually did. They had, CeeDee Lamb. They had Brandon Cooks. But I think Michael Gallup, with what he brings to the table, which is speed and the ability to take the top off of defense, I think the Steelers can use that. Look, we love Pickens and what he brings. Gallup on the other side of that, yeah. Or even as the number 3, bring in Michael Gallup. The price tag's not going to be crazy. He's been productive. He also has experience playing with other really good receivers. Again, the mindset, something that we have to think about. You can't just always go get any wide receiver and they think they're the number one guy. I think that's what comes in with Brandon Aiyuk. He's going to come in. He'd be the number one guy, but then that's how does Pickens react to that? That's a problem that we don't even need to create if we don't have to. You know what I'm saying? No reason to even go down that road. Another receiver that I believe that the Steelers can take a look at, Hunter Renfrow. Now, I know a lot of people don't like what Hunter Renfrow brings to the table, but I do. He's a wide receiver that goes over the middle. Number one, he's a slot receiver. And the Steelers, you might say Calvin Austin the third, he's a slot receiver. Yeah, he is. But Hunter Renfrow has proven at a higher level than Calvin Austin has, at a much higher level. He goes over the middle. He makes tough catches, runs great routes, gets open. That's something that the Steelers need, especially in this Arthur Smith offense. They're going to need somebody like that. You may say, well, with Russell Wilson, if he's the quarterback, is he going to be able to see Hunter Renfrow with some of these option routes going over the middle? Maybe that's a problem, but that's a problem I'd like to have. I would rather have Hunter Renfrow getting open, running option routes, going over the middle, making contested tough catches, and having the option of Russell Wilson, if he is the starter, by the way, being able to see him versus not guys getting open. Look, Calvin Austin, his biggest strength is taking the top off of a defense, not counting on him going over the middle because that's not what he does. This guy out of the slot, Hunter Renfrow, I think that's something that the Steelers could look at and use. Again, not the biggest of names, maybe not the biggest of acquisitions, but still a solid acquisition that, look, the Steelers just need to make. Everything doesn't have to be the home run splash. A lot of times, some of these acquisitions just have to be the ones that make sense. This one, it makes sense. So let's move on here. The next thing that I want to cover, this one, it gets a little bit tough because Cameron Heyward and Najee Harris, we got to figure out some things with their contract. Look, Cam Heyward, last year of his deal, $16 million salary is a $24 million cap hit. Now, I think the Steelers, obviously, they're in position to just absorb the $24 million and just move on. And this is the last year of your deal, and that's it. That's an option. I think a better option for the team is, look, Cam, do you want to play more past this year? I'm sure his answer is going to be, well, I plan to, but I don't know. Okay, here's what we will do. We'll stretch your deal out 2 years. We'll guarantee you the same money, so you're still going to get the $16 million. To help us, we need to do it over 2 years. Are you willing to do that? If not, I don't think you cut Cam Heyward. I think that's a mistake. But I think you just tell him, okay, well, this is going to be your last year in Pittsburgh, and that's it. Because, look, I like Cam. I think Cam is a great guy. Clearly, the Walter Payton NFL Man of the Year, we know what Cam is. Not to mention, when he's on the field, he is still very, very productive. Let's not kid ourselves. He was the Steelers' best interior lineman. I don't think there's any question about that. But the problem with Cam Heyward over the last couple of years is he has been hurt. And that kind of price tag for a guy that's not going to be out there that often, that becomes tricky. So while we want Cam Heyward, while we love Cam Heyward, having him out there at that price tag, I don't necessarily like it. Again, if they got to eat the $24 million and that's the last year, then we just have to eat the $24 million. That is what it is. I would love it if we could stretch it out over the next 2 years. Cam may not be willing to do that. Matter of fact, he's said that he wasn't willing to do that. So if he's not, it is what it is. Either way, I think this is the last year that Cam Heyward plays for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, moving on to Najee Harris, look, that is a little bit more of a difficult conversation because Najee Harris, it's his rookie deal. And Najee Harris has a 5th-year contract that we may or may not pick up. I like Najee. Najee became better as the offensive line got better, just like any running back. I mean, you're going to be better when your offensive line is better. The run schemes, they kind of got a little bit more simplified for the offensive line. So Najee was better running inside. Look, he's not a speed back, and we shouldn't expect him to be a speed back. Running constantly, running outside zones all the time in that just horrific Matt Canada offense. I'm like, come on, man. How do you not see what all of us fans see? I mean, it was plain as day. Run the ball in between the tackles. Run some counter. Run power. Anything off tackle. Stop running outside zones with Najee Harris. Lo and behold, they stopped doing it. They simplified it for the offensive line, and he got better. 3 straight years, over 1,000 yards. Najee Harris is a great running back. But do we pick up the 5th-year option? I don't know. Look, the Steelers found, a gem in Jaylen Warren. And Jaylen Warren made Najee Harris better. And what I say he made him better is because, number one, he could stay fresh. Najee didn't have to have 30 to 35 touches every single game. We have a guy that's reliable. So the fresher you can be as a running back, especially late in the game, the better you're going to be. And he's a good change of pace. And he challenged Najee. I don't know how many of us out there, us Steeler fans, were saying mid-season, Jaylen Warren needs to get the majority of the touches out of the running back position. There was a ton of us out there that were saying that. Now, as the season went on, we started to realize, hey, we love Jaylen Warren, but he started to fumble the ball the more that you gave him these touches. So Najee's the number one guy. I think they complement each other very, very well. Having said that, I'm not sure about the contract. I don't know that I would necessarily pick it up. Maybe it's a play for pay type of a thing with Najee. Again, I would love to have him, but that price tag, I don't know. And moving forward, are we willing to pay Najee Harris $11, $12, up to $13 million a year? Yeah, I think that would be a huge mistake for the Steelers to do. If we could get him under contract for the next 3 years for $7, $8 million, I'd be willing to do that. But 10, 12, no. Like I said, I like Najee, but we can't pay that kind of money to have for that, I should say. There's other places that we need to allocate money. I feel very confident that the Steelers can find a solid running back for less money. So let's move on here. And probably the thing that I have looked forward to covering and talking to you guys most about. Look, over the next 2 weeks, we're going to do a deep dive here into the offensive and defensive depth charts. So today, we're going to talk about the offensive depth chart. And as it sits right now, not in the future, we're going to put a grade on all of these. So not after the draft or not necessarily what we need to draft, but where we sit as a roster right now. And maybe that gives all of us Steeler fans a better idea of where we need to go within the draft here. So let's take a look at this. First off, let's look at center. As the roster sits right now, I'm laughing, but I don't. The Steelers don't have a center. I mean, Nate Herbig and James Daniels, yes, in a pinch, we could throw those guys out there at center. But that is not the ideal situation. So right now, if I had to give the Steelers center a grade, it would be incomplete because literally, do we want to go into week one with what we have at center right now? No. Last week, I mentioned I think center is the number one need for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I still believe it's the number one need. A lot of people are saying tackle. A lot of people are saying wide receiver. Some even say cornerback. I think it's center. We've missed out on two centers previously, people. We can't afford to do that. Creed Humphrey went to the Chiefs. He's an all-pro. Tyler Linderbaugh. We took Baby Hands Pickett before we took him. He is an all-pro center. Not an all-pro, but a Pro Bowl center. And he went to the Ravens, for crying out loud. I don't think the Steelers can make that mistake again. Reach for what you need versus trying to let something fall to you. You know, I think the Steelers could obviously trade back from 20 and still get a really good center. Zach Frazier comes to mind. But at the same time, if we can't trade back with somebody, go ahead and draft a center. Because you look at the roster right now, we literally don't have one, people. We do not have one that you would say you're going to go and start the season with, and that's troublesome. So that grade would be an incomplete. So next we have tackle. Like I said, Broderick Jones played very, very well as a rookie. He was still playing out of position. He was playing right tackle, and he did well, but he's a left tackle, and he's the left tackle of the future for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So they need to go ahead and move him over. Dan Moore Jr. is still on the roster, and unless we can trade him, I think the Steelers keep him. Now, don't kill me, Steeler fans. I am not saying that Dan Moore Jr. needs to be the starter. I am not saying that at all. As hard as I was on him last year, no. Dan Moore Jr. doesn't need to be the starter for the Steelers, not even a little bit. But to say that he just needs to be cut, I don't think that's the right idea either. He can be a swing tackle. I think absolutely he can stay on the roster and be a swing tackle. Plug him in. Look, he does have all that experience. Now, you could say, well, it's bad experience, Big B. Okay, I get it. But what would you rather have? An unproven guy that doesn't have as many snaps or has 40 snaps over the last 2-3 years to come in and put in a spot, or a guy that's got over 40 starts at left tackle, have that guy be your swing tackle? I'm going to take the latter all day of the week. Again, I'm in no way advocating for Dan Moore Jr. to be the starter at any position on the Steelers' offensive line. But I don't think you just throw him away either. I think there is a spot for him on the roster as a swing tackle. I think that would be something with his experience. I think it's invaluable. I really do. Again, he's played hard. He's tried hard. It just hasn't worked. But since it hasn't worked, let's keep him on the roster. We gave him the opportunity. He did what he could. I don't think unless we can trade him, I don't think we need to be cutting Dan Moore Jr. So to take a look at the tackle grade from where it sits right now, it's tough. It's really tough. But I think I would give the tackle a B-. And the reason that I say a B- is because Broderick Jones is really good. And Dan Moore, as a backup, I'm not sure there would be a ton of better backups right now in the league. Now, clearly that means we need to draft a guy and get him in there. Or if we're trading for a guy to get him in there. Yes, absolutely. But as a whole, just looking at what the Steelers have right now, I think it's a B-. You can argue with me if you want and think it's worse. I just think the upside and how Broderick Jones played, I think that requires a higher grade, and then you balance that out with where Dan Moore Jr. is. I think B-. Now let's go to the next need here. Wide receiver. Ooh, look, George Pickens, I think he has a world and just a ton of talent. We got to get his head on straight. I know that's kind of been the thing. He's got to work on his emotions. Maybe some of that was Deontay was rubbing off on him, but he's got to get that under control. Got to get better at the route tree. And he got better last year, by the way. But if he takes the next step this season, George Pickens goes into the top 10 because I think he's got top 10 receiver talent. He just hasn't put it all together. Part of that is who was throwing him the football. You know, there were plenty of stretches last year where why aren't they throwing it to Pickens? Why haven't they even looked his way? I think in an Arthur Smith offense, I think this will be something that he thrives in. So we've got Pickens. Now, after that, then where do you go? Well, we got Calvin Austin III. We got Van Jefferson. Now, Van Jefferson, a couple of years ago, was a decent number 3 receiver. But if the Steelers go out and draft at least one receiver, I think he is going to be a person that's going to be possibly a cap casualty and gets cut. Not a cap casualty, but a camp casualty and may get cut, because I'm not sure that if you go out and draft at least one, where does he fit in? Because I think Calvin Austin III is going to have a spot on the Steelers. So it may be between him and Van Jefferson battling it out for the number 3 position. I think all of that just kind of depends on what the Steelers are going to do here with the remainder of the offseason as far as going out and getting a wide receiver. I like the room, but the room needs work. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. It needs a lot of work. It's not that these players are terrible, because they're not. But if you're just thinking about it, this is in the bottom third of a wide receiver room right now. I think the Steelers need a free agent, and I think they need to draft at least one wide receiver in this upcoming draft. And if you're going to draft one, I think you got to draft one the first part of the 3rd round or higher, and you need another one later in the round. So what do we think about as far as the grade for a wide receiver? Look, with this room I just mentioned, it's bottom half of the league. So if I'm looking at the grade for a wide receiver, C-, I think is being fair. I think C- for a wide receiver, I think that's being fair. It's not a great room. I like the pieces, but we need better pieces, And I think me saying I like the pieces, that's me being a Steeler homer. If this was on the Bengals, I would say it was awful and they stunk. So take it for what it is, people. Steelers got to get better at the wide receiver position, period, end of story. Now let's look at the guard position. This is kind of something where the Steelers got some really good guards, starters. Nate Herbig is kind of a swing guy between center and guard. I like what the guards bring to the table. Look, James Daniels, very good. Isaac Suamula, even better. I love what those two guys are, both really, really physical at the point of attack. And once the Steelers got rid of trying to run a bunch of outside zone plays, the offensive line got better. Those two guys were getting tons of push. They were getting to second level. They both play extremely nasty, which is what you want out of your guards. James Daniel is just a mean guy. Suamula is so physical, not to mention athletic. Both of them are really good at the point of attack. That's why the Steelers were able to, once they started going downhill, then things changed and started running even in between the tackles. Things changed. So I like what they have. I like Herbig as a backup. I like what they had. Can they add more depth there? Absolutely. I don't know if they go to the draft to do that. They could. You can always draft depth near the end of the draft, and you can never have enough good offensive linemen. You can never have enough. Having said that, I think they might try to add somebody, either after free agency or in free agency, add more depth, or they go to, after training camp, rosters are set, people always get released. The Steelers have done a really good job of kind of picking people from other teams to add depth to their roster. I think the Steelers might be able to do the same thing here and upgrade the roster there. But overall, the Steelers at the guard position, I would say a B-. That might even be a little bit low, but I would say a B-. I like both Daniels and Suamula. I like both of them. So, like I said, B-. That's being a little bit, should I say, strict on what those guys bring to the table. A lot of you are going to say, Big B, you're nuts. It's got to be higher than that, probably a B+, but I'll say B-. I'll be fair. I will say B-. Now let's move to the tight end position. Look, Pat Freiermuth was out a lot last year, had an injury, hamstring injury, just never got right. You know how hamstrings can last all season. His seemed to. He had one spectacular game, but for the most part, it was just kind of, it wasn't a great season due to health. I expect to have a big bounce back year. Speaking of big, Darnell Washington is gigantic. I mean, he is basically an offensive tackle playing at the tight end position. The one thing that I am disappointed, they didn't try to use him more, number one, in goal line situations, but just use him more as a pass catcher. I don't think that the Steelers should have spent a third round pick if all you want to do is use him as an extra blocker. I get that he's an outstanding blocker, and he is outstanding blocker. But I think you got to use him. I think he can be more in the passing game than what he was used at last year. First year, I know he was coming off a little bit of a knee injury at Georgia. I think that's why he slid in the draft. But I believe that his pass catching ability has to be something that the Steelers utilize a lot more this year. Connor Heyward, I mean, I like what he does. He's kind of a, a Swiss Army knife. Plays a little fullback, plays a little tight end, does a lot of things on special teams. He's definitely a guy that you got to keep in your locker room. He's not ever going to be the starter. He's not ever going to be a star, but everybody can't be a star in the National Football League. Everybody can't be a starter in the National Football League. But you need guys like this that can do a lot on your football team. And I will say this, if Connor Heyward is your number 3 tight end with how athletic he is and the multitude of things that you can do, and you got a good tight end room. That much I can tell you. Tight end grade, give it a B. I think it's one of the better tight end rooms in the National Football League. I expect big things out of Pat Freiermuth this season. Darnell Washington, I expect even more. I know he'll be on the end line blocking, but I expect to see him, especially in goal line packages, he's just too big, too tall, too much of a mismatch not to try to utilize him down near the goal line. Now, running back. Look, Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren. We'll just start with them. Is there a better 1-2 punch in the league? What? I'm not sure that there is. Najee, 3 straight years, 1,000 yards. You could say that he struggled a little bit over the last 2 seasons. Last year was a real struggle to get going. I think more of that was, look, running backs can be great. Everybody's not Barry Sanders running behind mediocre offensive lines and still able to produce. Najee Harris is not the most quick-footed running back out there, but if you give him space, you give him a hole, you give him an opportunity to run without having to dodge people in the backfield as soon as he gets the ball, he's very effective. And he was that once the Steelers figured out, let's go downhill and stop going side to side when we're trying to run plays. Najee was good. Jaylen Warren, I mean, he is the prototypical change of pace running back. We spoke about it earlier. You don't want to give Jaylen Warren 25 to 30 carries. I know a lot of people were talking about that last year, that he needed to see the majority of the touches. We saw when they tried to do that a few times, he got worn down. He fumbled the football a little bit. Give the guy 8 to 10 carries a game, another 3 to 4 catches out of the backfield, and he is exactly what you need. He is electric. He's absolutely electric. Prototypical change of pace. Again, maybe there's 2 or 3. Maybe in Miami and Detroit, maybe they have better 1-2 punches. Okay, I'll give that to them. Other than that, I don't think there's anybody that the Steelers have to take a backseat to. Throw in Cordell Patterson. I don't really know what his role is going to be. 3 running backs is tough to play in the National Football League. It's really tough. Now, there can be some special packages where you might line him up with Warren, in the same backfield, or with Najee in the same backfield. But to have him be your number 3, I think you've got something there, because again, he's older, but he's proven himself to be a reliable football player at that position. So I love the grade of the Pittsburgh Steelers. You're going to call me biased. I don't care. I think they're an A. Like I said, it is a complete running back room as there is in the National Football League. There might be 2 or 3 better. I don't even think there's 3 better. I think there might be 2 better as far as total running back rooms in the league. So give me an A. Now, last but not least, quarterback. Look, we covered this last week. The quarterback room of the Pittsburgh Steelers is head and shoulders better than what it was before. Russell Wilson and Justin Fields are just better than anything that was in the room. Add in Kyle Allen, it's night and day difference. I'm sorry. But Kenny Pickett was what he was. And he's no longer with the Steelers for a reason. It's not because he was playing well. It's because the Steelers realize this is not the guy. We got to move on. That's the only reason that he's not with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't want to hear about, well, he asked for a trade. So who cares if he asked for a trade? If we thought that he was the guy, he would still be on the roster. Period. End of story. The Steelers realized that he wasn't. Time to move on. I love that about the new regime. Omar Khan saying, no, this was a mistake. Not to mention, it wasn't his mistake. He didn't draft Kenny Pickett, and he got rid of him. Russell Wilson, we bring him in. Justin Fields, we've got him in. The trade for Justin Fields couldn't have been better. 6th-round pick. I've said it before. I think Justin Fields needs to win the job. If he wins the job, he'll be the Steelers and plays well. He'll be the Steelers quarterback for the next decade. If that's the case, the Steelers are on to something. If not, we can start all over. We didn't lose out on anything. We're not paying them $20 million, $25 million, or anything like that. I like the room. Now, does it mean that it's a top 5 quarterback room in the league? Absolutely not. I think the grade on the Steelers is a C. Some people are going to say, man, that's way too high. Some people are going to say, well, that's a little low. I don't know. Russell Wilson didn't have a horrible year last year. He was in a situation where his head coach hated him. It's tough to play quarterback when your head coach hates you. You know, Justin Fields didn't have all the things necessary for him to be successful, but still had an okay year. It wasn't great. I understand people are going to say, it wasn't very good. It wasn't great. Kyle Allen is a good number 3. Hopefully he doesn't have to play. That's not a knock on Kyle Allen. I just want the other 2 to play better and play well so he's not needed. So those are the grades. Now, as far as an overall grade for the Pittsburgh Steelers, I would say a C, probably a C minus to a C plus, but definitely a C. Now, I know what you're going to say. You're going to look at these and say, hey, Brian, what are you talking about? There's A, there's a B, there's a B minus, another B minus. So how do you come up with a C plus? Well, here's the reason. The incomplete. Look at the center. It's worse than an F. We don't have one. So when you have worse than an F, then you have to account for that. So that's why I give the overall depth chart of the offense a C plus. Now, this is pre-draft. So things can easily change and will change when the draft gets here. Steelers are on top of it. I'm very confident in what they're doing. So the grade looks bad or it looks average for right now, but I think the Steelers are going to have an above average football team this year. It's not me being a homer. It's just what I know. So in the show right here, look, Steeler fans, we need some starters. We need some high-end starters right now. We need a starter at center. I think that has to be the highest priority. We need a starter at tackle. I think we need somebody at right tackle. It can't be Broderick Jones and we still have Dan Moore Jr. playing left tackle. That's not going to work, people. It's just not. We also need a corner. And we need starters, and we need a wide receiver. So those are the positions that the Steelers still need. They've got to address those in the draft. I still believe the Steelers can address wide receiver, at least getting a number 2 wide receiver in free agency. The guys that I mentioned, Tyler Boyd, Michael Gallup. Hunter Renfrow isn't really a number 2. He's more of a slot number 3 guy, but he could be a number 2, but he can't play outside on the opposite side of Pickens. But Gallup and Boyd can, and I think somebody, at least those 2, or at least in that mode, the Steelers have to go after. I think we've got a lot going on. I think the draft is next week. I believe the Steelers are ready. They're going to upgrade the roster. Omar Khan, he has done things a little bit unconventional for the Steelers. I think it's a welcome change. For so long, so many people have talked about the Steeler way. And I'm not bashing the Steeler way. Heck, I'm a part of it. I'm 48 years old. But times change, and you got to change with them. Just like we talked about Mike Tomlin needed to change the way that he wants to win football games to be more conducive to winning in the playoffs. This is the same thing. And Omar Khan has gotten a grasp on that. Move up and down in the draft. Go and make trades that you wouldn't normally see the Steelers make. All those things have to be a part of it. I love what they're doing. I love the direction that the Steelers are going. I think the draft next week is going to be exciting. I think the Steelers are going to do some more things that are going to be exciting, man. So I appreciate everybody showing up. Thank you guys. Again, as always, remember to subscribe, like the video, comment on the video. More importantly, hit the notification bell so you know when Steelers Almighty comes out. But the real thing is, tell your friend, man, tell them to come join Steelers Almighty. We got a lot going on here. I appreciate you all. Love you guys. Aloha.